So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is on 0.97 and this will probably be the last of 0.97 that I show until it actually releases. I haven't shown as much of 0.97 as has been shown on JMonster's channel and on the official channel anyway, because obviously it is something that's in development and such things are best left to be discussed by the actual developers themselves, which of course, you know, JMonster is, and anyone else who will chip in on the official Reforged channel will also have insider information about how things are going to be developed as well. So I have limited myself on what I've shown of 0.97 up to now for those reasons, but seeing as we are so close to release now, and you know there have been a couple of streams that JMonster has done as well showing off a few things, I will go ahead and show this one. I have been given the go ahead to do so after all, and this one was sent to me by Artorius, so big thank you to him for sending this one to me. And we will see new units, new unit models, and actually a new faction in play today, because Dor-winion is going to be on the field today, and I have not had the good fortune to show Dor-winion myself yet, although I'm sure that if you are aware of how Reforged and the development of the new patch has been progressing, you will be aware that Dor-winion are going to be in 0.97, an all-new faction. We'll start off, however, with the faction of the player who sent me the replay, which is going to be Angmar. Now, Angmar, in terms of how they play, they will always be a very aggressive, very sort of rush-focused faction with a lot of strong units capable of withstanding a lot of punishment, and of course the numbers that all factions are known for, but they will have some substantial changes in the upcoming patch. The main one will probably pertain to this unit right here at the front, the Barrow Wights. Now the Barrow Wights, of course, in the last patch were incredibly tanky, but they were also incredibly slow. Now this has been changed quite a lot, because the Barrow Wights have essentially lost half of their survivability from the previous patch, so they are now they've lost half their HP essentially, so they are now very killable in melee. They will still of course be able to withstand a lot of punishment, because that is the idea behind the Barrow Wights, the fact that they are this unit which can just hold units in melee for a long period of time. However, it will not be quite as extreme as it was in 0.96.1, I should say. And also one problem that the Barrow Wights did have in the last patch was they were incredibly slow, which led to a few difficulties for Angmar overall, just getting them into melee when you wanted them to. That is no longer the case anymore. They are just as fast as other infantry units, so not only are they less frustrating for Angmar players to use, but they are also less frustrating for players who are facing Angmar to actually try and kill. So it should be good for anyone really, anyone who's involved with Angmar. But we also have a couple of units here at the back, well, just behind him, I think actually just one unit actually, the Snagger Archers, which of course, low tier archers are another big change in 0.97. They are no longer going to be just this thing that you can blanket the battlefield with and have impunity in a skirmish fight just by outlasting your opponent and just slowly wearing down their skirmish line. More expensive archers will come into the fray a lot more now. But of course, with Angmar, using a bunch of cheap archers just to sort of hold the enemy's attention at range is kind of the whole point behind them, because they have a very limited skirmish line but a very potent melee line. So overall, Angmar will still play very much the same way from range, just because, you know, they have such a small variety of archers, all of it really being low tiers. We of course have the Guardians of Kharn-Dûm, which overall in terms of a unit aren't really going to change too much. Obviously stats have been tweaked for pretty much every faction, but the Guardians of Kharn-Dûm are still going to fulfill very much the same function. They are very, very tough to kill. They have a good shield value, they have good armour, they're a really, really solid line infantry unit which Angmar can make use of, which is something the other Orc factions don't really have. The Uruk-hai infantry of Isengard really being the closest equivalent really to the Guardians of Kharn-Dûm, but even then the Uruk-hai infantry are a little bit more balanced, whereas the Guardians of Kharn-Dûm are a little bit more focused around staying alive. So yeah, the Guardians of Kharn-Dûm still very much the same thing, even if the stats all around have been a little bit tweaked. We have the Trolls of Angmar as well, which I think actually are going to get a new unit model, which is one of the very few things that will still change for Angmar between now and release. Or is that the Trolls of Gundabad? I can't quite recall, but I think one of the Angmar Trolls is getting a new unit model. It might be the Trolls of Gundabad actually, because of their low polygon sort of armours with the horns that they've got. But the Trolls of Angmar, of course, very much the defensive Trolls, big great shields again, very much the same thing mechanically as you would see from the last patch, only of course there's a lot more for them to deal with now and contend with. We have the mighty Witch Realm Inquisitors, which again very much unchanged from the last patch, one of the most potent forces on horseback in the game, just because they're so strong in melee against other units of cavalry. Of course, they and Dol Amroth were the only ones with melee knights really in the previous patch. That is going to change substantially now though. I know that both Numenor and Umbar will be adding themselves to that list as well. There might be a couple of others as well, but I wouldn't want to get too far ahead of myself. We also have some Angmar Marauders here on the front line, which Angmar Marauders, of course, again, very much going to be the same sort of thing. Nothing really to write home about in melee, but they do have quite a lot of numbers in their unit, very much based around trying to swarm over the enemy and sort of deliver that Angmar, the Angmar Zerg rush that they're well known for, and having a few numbers in your faction can certainly help with that. Also, a couple of units of the Blackwatch Legion, again, functionally they're going to perform very similarly to how they did in 0.96.1, purely because all the Great Shield units, of course, they can push through lines. They're not necessarily the best in melee, particularly at dealing damage. They could do a decent job at keeping themselves alive for a decent amount of time, but they are quite expensive for what they offer in terms of melee power. They are very much based around their ability to push through lines, of course. And then we have, of course, the mighty Witch Realm Blackguard. They're still going to be one of the strongest sword and board units in the game, but they're not going to have... They're going to have some more competition, though, certainly from Numenor, with the Royal Legion of Armenelos. Numenor are not on the field today, but certainly they would throw their hat into the ring for the strongest sword and shield unit in the game alongside the Witch Realm Blackguard. So we'll see. I mean, that's always something we can look at when the patch fully releases and the stats are finalised. Trolls of Gundabad, of course, very much the aggressive, sort of the trolls with a slightly more aggressive tint to them when you compare them to the Trolls of Angmar. I think, actually, now that I think about it, this is the Troll which is getting a new unit model, although I could be wrong. Again, there's something that I've seen about a new troll with a new sort of new skin on them, but I can't remember which one it was. We have some Snagastalks, of course, again, very much the same thing, the fodder of the Angmar army. And then, out wide, we have some Orc Riders. However, the faction that I am really interested in talking us through now is Dor-winion, because I haven't shown off Dor-winion myself just yet. And the best way to think about Dor-winion is they're kind of like a human-elf hybrid faction. Well, not kind of, they are. The humans are what you would expect from a Western Kingdom of Men. They pack on the armour, a little bit more defensive, good at keeping themselves alive, absorbing a lot of pressure, but not necessarily the fastest at dealing damage, and also when compared to the Elven units they're fighting alongside, they certainly don't have as much skill. They're just not going to be as good in general, but they do form up a very solid core for Dor-winion. I was going to call them Numenor for a second then. And then, of course, the elves come in with the quality, so you can sprinkle a few elven units throughout your line, whether it's cavalry, pikes, archers, and they will really help back up the Elvelen units, which are, of course, the human units. Sounds like they have the best of both worlds, and they kind of do, but it's not quite that simple. You can't just rely on Dor-winion to be able to absorb pressure in the same way that a Gondor would, for example. They are quite expensive overall. Dor-winion are one of those factions which you're going to have to invest quite a lot in to really get the most out of your army. And I think I will save talking about Numenor, Dor-winion in a little bit more depth until the new patch releases and I can do some faction showcases, because I really think that will be the best place to really talk about what Dor-winion do well and sort of how they're meant to be played. But suffice it to say that I really like the idea of Dor-winion as a faction, having that human and elven mix, being able to rely on the things that both of those two racial groups are traditionally good at in Reforged, means you can have a really balanced army. Speaking of which, we have the Elvelen marksmen here at the front who combine a very strong defensive value in their armour with decent stats as well. Overall their stats are pretty good. It is worth saying, however, that this is very much the sort of thing you would expect from a heavy human archer. They are very good in a skirmish fight because of their very high armor values and just their ability to stick around in a long, attritious engagement. However, they don't necessarily deal the same level of damage as their elven brethren do. So certainly their focus is a little bit more defensive, whereas the elven archers that you will see in Dor-winion will be a little bit more based around special types of ammunition and damage. The Elvelen marksmen, however, they will still be able to outperform quite a lot of other human archers of a similar sort of class, but also you do tend to spend a little bit more on units like this with Dor-winion. Speaking of which, we also have some Elvelen Vanguard here, of course. Dor-winion. Dor-winion is one of those factions where there's a little bit less in terms of lore about them, so it's up to interpretation to sort of flesh them out a little bit. But of course, one thing Dor-winion is very well known for is its wine, so the Vanguard are here. And this is the sort of standard human spear unit that Dor-winion have available to them. Again, very similar story here. They have a good shield value, they have very strong armor values as well. Of course, as with most spear units of this type, they have a very low attack stat. I think it's 3, which is on a similar sort of level as the Belagaya spearmen or the Gondor spearmen. And again, the Elvelen Vanguard are more expensive than both of those two units, but they do have very strong armour and shields to compensate for that. And of course, spears in 0.97 will also be stronger against cavalry. Just in behind, you can see the waved blades here of the elves, the Morroquendi pikes, which are a unit they technically share with Dale, and Dor-winion do share a couple of units actually with Dale. But the Morroquendi pikemen for Dor-winion, of course, share the dark purple colours that Dor-winion have on their standards. And of course the Morroquendi pikes are an elven pike unit, so you know exactly what to expect from them. They're going to be very, very strong indeed. Maybe not quite as strong as the Imladris pikemen, but even so, the Morroquendi pikes can do a fantastic job on the front line, especially when you combine them with the more heavily armoured Helvellyn units. It is a difficult front line to break down, and Dor-winion overall can be seen as having a front line which is very difficult to break down, and then other areas in which they're a little bit more damage focused. Speaking of which, we have some Helvellyn cohorts over here, which of course are the sort of standard line infantry that Dor-winion can call upon. So again, you'll be looking at them in the same sort of vein as like Gondor infantry or Arthedain men-at-arms. Again, the Helvellyn cohorts are a little bit more expensive than those units, but then again they also have stronger base armour values than those units, also a fantastic shield value, and again they also have something else which I've forgotten to mention already actually about Dor-winion. Because of their elven training regimens that they are a part of, these Helvellyn units also have very good vigour, which essentially means that they will not get tired quite so quickly as other units, which is a big deal. I mean, fatigue over the course of a long engagement, which Dor-winion will often be a part of with how you can build their armies, that is a very useful facet of their army. Another unit of Helvellyn cohort, and then over here we have what I believe are their knights. I think these are classed as knights. They're either knights or multiple HP spear cavalry, because it's the Nandorian Glade Lords, which are multiple HP. This is the strongest unit of cavalry that Dor-winion can field. You can see the elven sort of influences here. Obviously a little bit of the Imladris about them here, although, you know, to be quite frank, I think the elves of Dor-winion would be more closely akin to the Woodland Realms elves, at least in terms of mechanics. But even so, the Nandorian Glade Lords are obviously going to be, as with any multiple HP elven cavalry which is intended for a general, they're obviously going to be exceptionally strong, especially in melee against other cavalry. Charging into units of infantry really are a very strong all-purpose unit. And then over here we can see that there is actually another unit out here on the flank. We have some Morroquendi bows, which Morroquendi bows, of course, another unit they share with Dale, although I think this might be something which is unique to the Dor-winion variant. They pull out a glaive in melee as well, which actually does mean they have an anti-cavalry bonus. So again, this is something you could perhaps link back to another elven faction in Linden. The Harlinden Guard, of course, are spearmen in melee as well, and considering 0.97's buffs to spearmen, the Morroquendi bows will find themselves to be a very good multi-purpose unit indeed, as well as having the poison arrows, which poison arrows, if you are not aware, they are functionally speaking quite similar to fire arrows in that anything they hit, the morale will drop on them. However, unlike fire arrows, they do not cause the unit that is firing them to slow down their fire rate, nor does it expend more of the ammunition pool. So a very, very strong unit. And obviously poison arrows, something that the Morroquendi bows share with the Woodland, not the Woodland Realms, it's the basic Lothlorien archer. I can't quite remember what they're called off the top of my head now. Regardless, we have Rhudaur, played by Messier Corday, and he has got some Dunman Hunters here at the front, which of course, Rhudaur again, very much like Angmar, for the most part their archers are going to be focused around numbers and just sort of trying to wear down the enemy front line. These Dunman Hunters will really struggle to do damage to that Dor-winion front line. But nonetheless, the Dunman Hunters will still be a very cheap option for Rhudaur, at least in comparison to other archers. Back here on the front line, another thing Rhudaur has surprisingly in their favour is the pikes. Harad pikemen have been changed a little bit. Not so much in how good they are still as good as they ever were. However, now you can only have one before the cost increases, and they are also a little bit more expensive than they were. So no longer can you sort of get away with having a unit of Harad pikemen for 650 florins and have them outperform any other pike for that price point very comfortably. So the Harad pikemen now very much a centre to the Rhudaur line in a similar way, similar in many ways, if I can get my words out, to how the Wardens of Tir Gorthad are for Cardolan, or the Illuminous Gate Guards are for Arthedain. Very much this sort of pike unit which sits in the centre of the line and holds everything together. And speaking of which, on either side of them they do have Dunman pikemen, which cheap pikes are still going to perform the same role as they always did. They've got terrible stats, of course, but as long as they can keep their phalanx in shape and their pikes pointed towards the enemy, they should be just fine. Obviously a multiple HP armour-piercing unit, the Witcher Arm and Slavers are going to be here as well, which will be useful against the Helvellyn units of Dor-winion. They'll carve through them very, very efficiently. Less so against Elven units they may come across. We also have the Harad Berserkers, which have been given they've been made more expensive, but overall it is a buff that they have been given, because now they are multiple HP, so they are essentially a General's Bodyguard tier unit. And the Axe Throwers as well, I believe Axe Throwers now they are not AP, I think that change is in effect as of this moment. So the axe throwers will not deal armor piercing damage, but the base damage will go up. So essentially axe throwers will be extremely potent against lightly armored units. So if you're up against Linden, axe throwers may very well be the way to go. But they won't be able to just carve through heavily armoured units from the front, particularly if their shields are pointing in the right direction. Rhudaur Clansmen, of course, high shield value on these lads as well. But, you know, spears, the buffs that they have in 0.97 should make the Rhudaur Clansmen a very attractive unit to bring as Rhudaur. Over here we have the Coldfell Maidens, which as of this moment do not have their new unit model. I have seen a new unit model for the Coldfell Maidens, which I think was done by the Cowering Coma, which looks fantastic, I must say, and I can't wait for that to be implemented into the game, because it really does upgrade the Coldfell Maidens. The Coldfell Maidens have always looked a little bit out of place in terms of style for me in Reforged, but as of now, it's still the old unit model. But of course the Coldfell Maidens, Spear Cav in melee, Javelin Cavalry at range, terrific force for Rhudaur to use, just as effective as they always were. And then of course the Franadine Nobles, which still, they're knights, which deal armor piercing damage in melee, but have a little bit lower defense, so it's still that trade-off that Rhudaur always had, but I'm a big fan of the Franadine Nobles, very, very effective. And then we have the forces of Harad, so we have the Dismounted Serpent Guard here on the front line, played by FFA Muffins. He has got the upgraded Dismounted Serpent Guard. I could have sworn that the Dismounted Serpent Guard, or at least the Serpent Guard in general, also had an upgraded model, although I might be wrong about that, or an updated model I should say. Regardless, the upgraded Dismounted Serpent Guard should be more than enough to do decently well against most of the Angmar infantry, to be honest with you, or at least go toe-to-toe with it, which is more than can be said for the cheaper forces of the Haradrim. This, however, is a new armour upgrade. Rather than sort of wearing the robes and pyjamas that the standard Haradrim archers and spears used to wear, now the Haradrim archers wear something a little bit more in keeping, a little bit more updated as well. So the Haradrim archers, basic, again, very much based around their numbers more than anything else, 2 units of them on the front line. But against Angmar, to be quite blunt, you don't need to spend a huge amount of money on sort of a huge skirmish line. Just having a few units which can do a lot of damage, like rangers, or a couple of units just to hold their attention, will be more than enough, which of course the Haradrim archers can certainly do. Got some Muhard Beastmasters, which are of course the same as they always were as well. Javelin Cavalry, with the camels as well, so that makes them a very good anti-cavalry tool. Again, I'm not sure how well they'll do against the Witch Realm Inquisitors, but we shall see. The Rumour Kill, of course, the Tour de Force that Harad has always had, the War Beasts of Harad, which of course are the sort of... This is a unit which was scarcely used in the last patch because it was not really worthwhile bringing for the cost it was. I'm very interested to see how they do now. They've certainly had their unit models increased by quite a lot at 26. This sort of monstrous cavalry with a huge charge. We'll see if they can lay that down. We have the Black Serpents, which the Black Serpents, I'm actually not sure. They've certainly had a little bit of a reskin. Their armour has been made darker, of course. I don't know whether the Black Serpents have been made knights or not. I don't think they have. I'm like 99% sure they haven't been made into knights, but we'll see. I mean, even so, even if they're not multiple HP lancers like this, they're very, very quick as well, the Black Serpents, which is one of the real boons to using them. Even though they aren't knights, they can still just outrun most other cavalry anyway, so you don't need to be forced into an engagement with the Black Serpents as you might be with a slower unit of cavalry. We have some Southron Pikemen as well, who have had a slight upgrade to their unit models as well, sort of darkest tones and sort of... Again, the old Southron unit models have been used ever since Vanilla 3rd Age, so it's good to see that they've had a little bit of love as well, a little bit of attention. Over here we've got some Shoalmen of Harad, obviously still very, very strong, multiple HP, armour piercing, still got the shields as well, essentially all the benefits of shock infantry whilst having a shield. What more can you ask for? And another unit of Southron Pikemen, and that's going to just about do it. So, without further ado, let us begin. So we should be able to see some of the 0.97 mechanics coming into play here, not least from Dor-winion. Obviously a lot of their stuff is new, including the poison arrows, but also we'll be able to see hopefully the heightened effectiveness of spearmen, with cavalry being a little bit more cautious of engaging near where spears are. So here they're slowly shuffling forward of the Dunman Hunters as well. One thing that is worth bearing in mind as well is that low tier archers like the Dunman Hunters or the Haradrim archers over here, or the Snaga archers that Angmar are using, very low range, or at least lower range than other archers, so they will need to... This was the case in 0.96.1 as well, but it is going to be pronounced in 0.97, because having to march into place and getting off the first volley is so important in a skirmish fight like this, so having to march forward is often going to be quite painful. Although from two factions that have both got very low tier archers like Angmar and Harad, maybe that's not going to bother them too much. And you can see here that the, I think they're Mahood actually. Yes, Mahood Beastmasters. I should get used to that new pronunciation of the Harajam units. You can see that they're raining down death onto the Guardians of Kharndoom. You can see here that the Camel's proving a little bit too slow actually to get out of range of the Witch Realm Inquisitors quickly, but it is tit for tat really, because they are taking a bit of javelin fire, and a couple of those unit models may fall away as well, so trading a couple of Camels for even 1 or 2 Witch Realm Inquisitors will certainly be worth it, because Witch Realm Inquisitors are so deadly, of course. These Haraj Marchers are awfully close to the Angmar front line as it moves forward in a big old clump. They need to get out of there, certainly. You can actually see over here as well that I think you can see that how slowly the Guardians of Kharndoom are moving. I think that's because this area of terrain here in the middle, this sort of boggy riverbed, is a new terrain type which has been added, which will slow units down and tire them out faster. At least that is, I think, what's going on, because they were up to charge speed there and they're moving very slowly. I know that that is a thing in 0.97, so the terrain types will play more of a role, which I'm glad of. It will make battles a little bit more interesting, even on relatively flat maps here like the dry lake bed. It'll offer a little bit more interest rather than just it being a flat ground for you to sort of try and shift your cavalry around the flanks on. And here you can see the Warbeast Harad getting a brutal charge onto the Angmar Marauders, and that was terrible for Angmar, because they need all the infantry they can get, because one thing that Harad will certainly want to do here is pick apart Angmar on the advance. And those are the Black Serpents, and they'll get a very nice charge off as well. This is one problem that Angmar's force here has got. They don't have any spears or pikes as part of their main infantry line, which is going to hurt them on the advance. Having said that, Angmar do have some sort of real heavy hitters here in terms of the Trolls and the Witch Realm Inquisitors, but when it comes to heavy hitters, they don't come much heavier than Harad with their Mumakil and their Warbeasts. Usually Angmar can certainly have the advantage in terms of outright brute power, but Harad is certainly the sort of faction which can match them blow for blow in that regard, and even surpass them if they choose to invest enough money, and that is what FFA Muffins has decided to do here. What have we got over here? Morroquendi Stalkers, which is a unit of Dor-winion cavalry which can hide. They are a horse archer unit that pull out those glaives in melee, so again this is something which can be drawn as a comparison to Linden with their horse archers as well, because they also double as spear cavalry in melee, which is a very useful combination, because it means you can harass the enemy at range as well as use them as cavalry in a cav-to-cav fight as well. Here you can see the Black Serpents. It's really not been a good time so far for Angmar, although you can see that the other unit of Morroquendi Stalkers has also wheeled itself around here, and they too have the poison arrows. You can see the black trails there, which will start to pick away at the morale of Harad. And Harad as an evil men faction will have some shortcomings there, although to be fair, Harad have invested quite a lot of money. You know, the Harajam Archers and the Southron Pikemen are relatively low tier, but the rest of their army, Trollman, Serpent Guard, good quality cavalry and their beasts, it's not going to be the easiest force to break. And you can see here that with the pikes as well, that's going to be something which Angmar are really going to struggle with. You can see that they have really been picked apart here on the front line. The Blackwatch Legion, so good at pushing through the line, but Angmar needs them to be melee powerhouses here to sort of hold their front line together, and that's not really what the Blackwatch Legion are all about. They can absorb quite a lot of ammunition, but even so, I mean, at this point the onus is probably on Dor-winion to start moving forward, at least advance on Rhudaur and put some pressure on, because at this point the Rhudaur cavalry is also on the way over here, and Angmar is not going to be able to survive if the Rhudaur cavalry comes over here as well, I don't think, because you can see here in the back lines, the Coldfell Maidens are already actually running roughshod over the Rhudaur back. Snaga Archers already shaken. The Kelduin River Patrol, which are another unit actually Dor-winion shares with Dale, so Dor-winion are sending over some support units. You can see they too have the purple coloration, but they are of course the Lake Town River Patrol functionally, so a lower tier javelin that Dor-winion have available to them. And you can see that the Coldfell Maidens are actually shaken. They were maybe asked to do a little bit too much, and the Witch Realm Inquisitors are over here as well. The Nandoran Glade Lords are also offering their support. I think, yeah, the Mumakil are reforming, so they ran amok at some point and have now been chased off the field. So at this point actually the tables are starting to turn a little bit. Harad, they were able to deal off quite a grievous amount of damage actually to Angmar on the advance, but Angmar have been able to weather that storm a little bit. The Mumakil are gone. I cannot see the Warbeasts anymore either. What on earth happened to them? You'd think I'd see them. There's a lot of their corpses over here actually, so they may have died there. They might have got caught on the Trolls actually. Because I can see there's a lot of Trolls of Angmar, but not a lot of Trolls of Gundabad anymore. So that implies a fierce fight indeed. Here you can see that the Barrow Wights are moving in. You can see that they're moving significantly faster than they used to, so they're now on the front line. It's going to make it very difficult for Harad to cut through the Angmar forces quickly. The Witch-Realm Blackguard are on the front line as well, so in spite of Harad having perhaps a more quality-focused infantry force than you would normally expect from them, they are still not going to be able to stand up to Angmar over the long haul. But with the support of Rhudaur's cavalry, the Franadine nobles in particular, maybe they can turn this around. There's the Blackguard, but they are still getting shot there by the Morroquendi Stalkers. You can see the poison arrows leaving their trails. They won't be able to rout the Franadine nobles, of course, but at this point it's just about dealing damage to a high-profile target. Back there, the Morroquendi Stalkers, pressurising the back line of Harad. The Haradrim archers turning around. This is not where the Dor-winion cavalry wants to be. As tough as the Elvelyn units, the human units of Dor-winion are, the Elven units do tend to be a lot more fragile. They do tend to have lower armour values overall, which for a cheap unit of archers like the Haradrim archers is all you need to know. However, without any sort of support, then Aldering Glade Lords are just going to carve right through them. There goes the Rhudaur general, at the hands of the Witch-Realm Inquisitors, no less. And at this point, Rhudaur's on its way over here to try and give some support, which they actually need to at this point, because Angmar is gaining the upper hand now. Angmar's sheer brute force proving too much over the long haul for Harad. And again, those Mumakills started off the battle very, very nicely, causing a bit of panic in the enemy lines, as well as those javelins. A lot of damage on the approach for Angmar. But ultimately, it is looking a little bit more desperate here for Harad. You can see the Black Serpents, they're starting to bleed unit models as well. They're being chased around by the Nandarin Glade Lords, which they really don't want to stay in melee with the Nandarin Glade Lords. They'll get ripped to pieces. You can see over here, Mumakil actually still doing damage. This is still a bit of a map hazard here, because they just stomped down and killed a good chunk there of those Witch-Realm Inquisitors, which is a real bonus actually for the Haradman, the Haradrim there. The Morroquendi Stalkers, they're shooting point blank into the Mumakil. I don't think that's actually what they're going for. I think they're going for the Hashari Shadows. Well, regardless, the Hashari Shadows have just been finished off in double quick time by the Witch-Realm Inquisitors. Here comes the Rhudaur force though. With all of these reinforcements, Angmar will go on to lose this fight. So at this point it's up to Dor-winion really. What do they want to do? They still haven't moved any of their infantry. They have been microing their cavalry pretty intensely. Nandarin Glade Lords are over here, but I would argue that now that Rhudaur have sort of completely vacated their position, you need to move a little bit. You need to decide whether you're going to try and set up a defence for when the red team inevitably wins over here, if you're just going to leave your ally Angmar to their fate, or you need to start sprinting over here to support them. You can see here the Southron pikemen have got the Barrow Wights at arm's length with their pikes down. So again, very much a battle of ebbs and flows this. Initially, Harad got some very nice damage off on Angmar on the approach. Then Angmar, with a bit of Dor-winion support, really tore into Harad very, very quickly. But now, with the support of Rhudaur, and with Harad rallying some of their stronger units, like the Trollmen here, it looks as though Angmar are going to be defeated once and for all. Although Angmar are also actually sending a lot of their units, which they managed to save, over to Dor-winion. And Dor-winion, of course, I do feel as though with the way Dor-winion is set up, in this sort of situation where their cavalry has already been utilised quite heavily, if you're talking about just their infantry does work very well at absorbing pressure with their Elvelyn units, and then a little bit later committing the Elven units to sort of tilt the fight in your favour. So I can see why they're thinking of adopting a more defensive posture, as Dor-winion is now moving their infantry, but you can see that very much there's not really too much left of Angmar at this point. There are the Nandarin Glade Lords. They might actually have a good window here to charge into the back of these Rhudaur Axemen. Do a pretty hefty amount of damage. It looks like that is what they're going to do. The Nandarin Glade Lords don't have great armour either, just like the rest of the Elven units in Dor-winion, but they do still have those shields, which does at least set them apart from the other units of Dor-winion cavalry, the Elven Riders. But they did get a very nice charge there into the back of those Rhudaur Axemen. A lot of dead Northmen now lying in the sands. They're a long way from home, Rhudaur. As are Angmar, come to think of it. You can certainly see Harad and Dor-winion fighting in these sorts of regions, though. And And that is the end of the Barrow-wights. So you can see the Barrow-wights, when they did get surrounded, they got finished off pretty quickly. If this was in 0.96.1, they would have stayed fighting for probably a good 5 minutes longer. So it is a pretty significant change for them. They were able to close the distance into melee much faster, which should please any Angmar players out there. But also, you know, for those who are facing Angmar, they will no longer be quite the same tour de force they were once they got into melee, because previously as an Angmar player you could get away with a good deal as the Barrow-wights. You could just commit them forward and you would know that just based on how long they'd be in melee, they'd rack up a fairly hefty kill count. They'd really get in the way of the enemy, and it was too potent for what it was once they were in melee, and it was too annoying to actually move them up into melee. So yeah, it's a good change. It's the best of both worlds, really. It's both a buff and a nerf. So now we have a little bit of a lull in the middle of the battle. So this is, I know that we aren't technically like exactly halfway through the battle yet, but that was phase 1, and let's see. Well, I mean, the blue team technically have lost a lot more, which does make a good deal of sense because Angmar, their army is very, very depleted at this point. They do still have their Witcher Arm Inquisitors in a decent number, which is good to see. Keltwin River Patrol are moving over here as well. Morroquendi Pikes, I mean, we shall see. Some Witcher Arm Blackguard. I would back Dor-winion to withstand an assault for quite some time in this situation. But I would also say that Rhudaur certainly should have the tools to deal with this sort of defensive position. Rhudaur with their javelins, I mean Harad with their javelins. Rhudaur and Harad are probably the most 2 javelin heavy factions in the entire game alongside Linden. And even then, with Linden, it's fairly arguable. You will always see Linden bring some javelins, really, but Rhudaur and Harad, certainly, a very big part of what their faction are all about. But, you know, Trollshaw Axe Throwers and Franadine Berserkers, they are Axe Thrower units now, which, as I said, against heavily armoured and shielded units from the front, will no longer do all that much damage. So the Alvelin units will actually be fairly well positioned here to actually absorb quite a lot of damage. This, however, will be a unit which will be very useful for Rhudaur. For Odrum Javelins, AP in melee. AP Javelins will be able to rip through those Alvelin units, you would imagine. So we shall see. And then there's also the Witcher Arm Enslavers still in perfect health as well. So certainly at this point, with the lead that they have already, you would imagine that Harad and Rhudaur should go on to win this, really. But we shall see. Let's go up to ×2 speed, I think. And let's not forget that the defenders here at this point, I'm going to refer to them as defenders really, because at this point they are going to be trying to withstand the assault from Harad and Rhudaur. Morroquendi bows as elven archers. When they've got a foe that's marching towards them, particularly as Rhudaur and Harad are both factions with limited armour values, those poison arrows are going to shred right through the ranks of the evil men as they move forward. The Alvelin units should be able to hold them in place, especially with the support of Morroquendi pikes. Really, I think this comes down to whether or not the red team can utilise their javelins and axe throwers to their fullest effects. If they do, it's going to be really difficult for what is primarily at this point a Dor-winion effort to succeed. Also, the Alvelin Vanguard, at this point there's not a lot of cavalry for them to deal with. So while they'll be able to hold down the front line with relative ease, they won't be able to do quite the level of damage that perhaps Dor-winion are hoping for. Of course, at the moment they're referred to as Saxons. That is, of course, not going to be in the full release. Both armies just still measuring one another up. I mean, certainly from a Harad and Rhudaur perspective, you want to be aggressive here. You have the numbers advantage. You can sweep around both flanks. You can utilise those javelins and axe throwers to their fullest effect. If you get involved in an elongated skirmish fight with Dor-winion, especially if it, well, you know, obviously there are factions which can get into a long skirmish fight with Dor-winion. You know, Alvelin marksman being this sort of pretty high quality, heavily armoured archer unit. It's not something that's alien to a lot of other factions. Umbar with their Abrazani Nadibawi, Dale with their Bardian marksman. Other factions have got units of similar cost that do a similar thing. But certainly not Rhudaur and Harad in this sort of situation. It's not something they really want to get involved with Dor-winion, especially seeing as Dor-winion also have those Morroquendi bows in reserve as well. There's still Snaga archers. All of the ranged advantages, long-ranged archer advantages belong to the blue team. Raj Marchers firing. What's that? The Dunman Hunters were firing at something. There's still actually some green triangles around here. They are routing units, of course, at least you would certainly imagine it to be so. Rodram Javelins moving into position as well. Rhudaur Axemen, of course, a unit which can hide, which is a very useful little feature of these units. Most sort of basic human shock infantry units like this are just out in the open where any old archer can hit them. Rhudaur, however, can protect themselves by hiding. This fight is going to be decided very, very quickly, because while it's all well and good for me to sit here and say that the red team should be aggressive, their attack could fall apart very, very quickly if they don't do it right. You know, a lot of their ranks are made up of pikes and sort of more lightly armoured ranged units, which is exactly the sort of thing which Dor-winion like at this sort of range. And I think they do actually have 3 units of Elvelyn marksmen as well. I think, yeah, we are now ready to go back down to 1 speed. The Elvelyn marksmen are now starting to fire. So as I said, damage is not really the main priority of the Elvelyn marksmen. Their armour, their ability to engage in skirmish fights most certainly is. And the Morroquendi bows are also making their way to the front line as well, so perhaps Dor-winion sensing that if they can do a lot of damage with a good few volleys before the evil men can even connect with their lines, that will be their best chance of victory here, although the Morroquendi bows need to get into position a little bit more quickly than they're currently doing, I think. I love the colour scheme of Dor-winion, I must say. The purple really works for me. Interesting place as well. I mean, just lounging around all day, drinking wine in the more sunny climes of the just east of Dale. Sounds like a nice place if it weren't for the Easterlings right on your doorstep. There are the poison arrows leaving their black trails. They're going after the trollmen actually, which is an interesting choice. The trollmen, their armour is certainly not very high, and by this point they may very well have expended their hit points, but they do have a shield. Although I suppose the poison arrows are bound to hit something over here, even if they don't hit the trollmen anyway. Forward come the Rhudaur Axemen in melee, off a charge with their armour piercing. They will actually very much enjoy facing the Elvelyn units, especially the Elvelyn spears, but they'll be very lucky if they actually get there, because here come the Witchram Inquisitors. It's going to be a thunderous charge downhill. They may very well be melee cavalry, but with the mass of cavalry, and with how strong the Witchram Inquisitors are, not a lot of kills of course off a charge with melee cavalry like that. But the Rhudaur marksmen did turn around actually, and that will delay them just a little bit longer. You can see here that more arrows coming in, causing more of the Rhudaur forces to fall. There are the Rhudaur Berserkers. Dor-winion leaving it very late to retreat their archers, and I'm not sure whether they're actually going to manage it there. The Rhudaur Axemen getting into their charge animation, and a few of the Elvelyn marksmen at the very least will be caught out by the Rhudaur axes. But the Rhudaur axes will not really be able to make too much headway against this front line, less because of the spears and more because of the Elvelyn, not the Elvelyn pikes, the Morroquendi pikes. Forward come the Elvelyn cohort. You can see the Morroquendi pikes trying to retreat behind the line. That really is the problem at this point. As long as Rhudaur and Harad stay aggressive, I really do think that Dor-winion will struggle, because a lot of their power at this point is bound up in their archers. And if they can keep the pressure up here, Harad and Rhudaur, they should be able to overwhelm the Dor-winion front line with javelins and axe throwers, and the archers will not be able to get good shots off, but we shall see. I mean, the Dunman pikemen are already shaken. They're a little bit too far ahead actually. The Dunman pikemen sticking out a little bit further in front than the rest of the Rhudaur advance, and a few volleys from these Dor-winion archers and that could send the Dunman pikemen routing. Here in the middle we have the Rhudaur pikes. They're made of sterner stuff. They will stay in melee for longer, not least, you know, because of their shield. Meanwhile, there are a few. Oh, here you can see that the Reforged javelins are over here. So they're trading blows, I think, with the. No, the Reforged javelins are at the very least going after the Witchram Blackguard and the Elvelyn cohort. I thought they were making the terrible mistake of going javelin to javelin with a much cheaper unit of javelins, but don't think that is the case. Rhudaur Berserkers sort of moving back from the front line a little bit. They will throw their axes and then they will move into melee. Although they're really taking a beating now from the Dor-winion javelins, and what the evil men really wanted here was a quick, decisive strike, an engagement which didn't last a great deal of time, and in which they were able to cripple the Dor-winion front line quickly. Now over here they are starting to overrun, and they're going to start to sort of engage these units of archers and then try and work up the line, but they need to make something happen here a little bit more quickly, I think, the evil men, because the longer this fight goes on, the more that is going to suit Dor-winion, you would imagine. Morroquendi bows pulling out their glaives, getting into melee with the trollmen. Trollmen should beat them in melee, to be fair. The Morroquendi bows are elven archers, of course, which will make them strong in melee. But the trollmen are a very strong melee unit, backed up by a few serpent guard. And let's not forget the Morroquendi bows also have a focus around dealing with cavalry in melee with those glaives, which of course count as spears. Morroquendi Stalkers revealing themselves again. I'd actually forgotten about them as well. So they can hide, of course, so they've been kept in reserve until now. As well as the unit of Dor-winion cavalry here, the Nandering Glade Lords, which also, they were sort of hidden in the back lines over here, and now they've come around to try and charge into the rear, which this is a problem because while Harad are making some real gains over here on the flank, I say that, Harad are even starting to be turned back now as well. The Morroquendi bows are shaken. With the support, however, of those horse archers shooting into the back of the Haradrim, I think Dor-winion may very well have the wherewithal to actually withstand this assault. You can see here that more and more of these men from Rhudaur are starting to run for the hills. Their morale just not able to hold itself together, of course. Even the Dor-winion forces are starting to become shaken now, but Dor-winion, discipline, the Elvelyn units, subject to elven training, and that will have an effect on their morale as well, of course. Those large shields with those arming swords, holding back the savage men of Rhudaur at bay, holding the savage men of Rhudaur at bay. And those Rhudaur clansmen are also wavering. Yeah, and you can see here, yeah, Dor-winion are going to win this. I don't think there's any way back for the evil men at this point. A lot of their units are just being routed en masse. The Morroquendi pikes and the Elvelyn Vine Guard on the front line, complementing one another's strengths brilliantly. And that is what Dor-winion are all about. If you can have the right combination of units, you can make yourself very, very difficult to break down. Certainly one thing you can do as Dor-winion is not make it easy for your opponent. However, there is one unit which will probably concern Dor-winion. That is the Witch Realm Enslavers. They don't really have anything that could easily deal with them, other than perhaps the cavalry with a few charges. I mean, I'm sure they will. I mean, they still have archer ammunition, so there's only so much Witch Realm Enslavers are going to be able to do as they utilise those big trident axes of theirs, the Elvelyn marksmen, engaging them in melee, preventing them from running amok all over the lines. The Franadine pikemen as well, also following them in as the Elvelyn Vine Guard break. I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of these Rhudaur units have actually come back from routing. Maybe all is not lost, but I mean, just the presence of the Morroquendi pikes is going to make things pretty difficult here. The Trollmen of Harad, though, even with only 25 of them remaining, victory still seems certain. And the Morroquendi breaking, although to be fair, that was the Franadine pikemen were about to close the jaws on them, so that does make a decent amount of sense. Still some more poison arrows flowing in from the Morroquendi Stalkers, but drips and drabs at this point. Back go the Dunman Hunters, routing once again. The Rhudaur clansmen are also going to rout. I just think that with at the rate Rhudaur are routing because of these rear charges from what's left of the Dor-winion cavalry, I just don't think Rhudaur are going to be able to turn it back. Although there goes the Dor-winion general. They do still have the Franadine Berserkers as well, which is another very powerful unit. So I don't know, I mean, yeah, you can see these Witch Realm Enslavers. They're now actually getting attacked by the Witch Realm Blackguard as well, so the Witch King, unimpressed with Rhudaur's betrayal. The Witch Realm Blackguard will be able to go toe-to-toe with a unit like this, backed up by the Elvelyn Marksmen. Here come the Elvelyn cohorts as well as some Vine Guard. Yeah, that Dor-winion cavalry I think is going to be pretty decisive here. The Dunman Hunters are trying to shoot them down, which is certainly the best thing to be doing here at this point. A lot of this Dor-winion cavalry is pretty fragile when you subject it to arrow fire. Here comes the Morroquendi pikes coming in here to help deal with the Franadine Berserkers, so you can see Dor-winion very much picking their engagements here. And actually they ended up winning over here as well. The Trollmen were finally it was too much for them. Morroquendi bows also now utilising the rest of their ammunition. Poison arrows being loosed. And that is another good point. I mean, Rhudaur, as an evil men faction, their morale is not the best to begin with. But they have also been subject to the poison arrows, which, considering the amount of breaking that was happening all along the front line, the cavalry rear charging can account for quite a lot of it, to be fair. Cavalry charges in the rear can be very devastating. But those poison arrows certainly played their part as well. Forward come the Dor-winion units again. You can can see here, Rhudaur Berserkers, more and more of the Elvellyn units just overwhelming the Rhudaur. That's going to be the end of them. That's a lot of Rhudaur clansmen that are also routing. In go the Nandorin Glade Lords once again, charging in, doing a lot of damage to the Rhudaur Berserkers. Victory seems certain, only a fool could lose this battle. Very topsy-turvy battle this was as well. Initially, Harad looked like they were doing a lot of damage, then Angmar came back into it, then Angmar were outmatched by being 2v1'd. But Dor-winion was able to conserve enough of their strength that there was just too much of them left for the battered remnants of Harad and Rhudaur to deal with. Yeah, there we go, you can see all of the Elvellyn units, the Morroquendi pikes. Because again, I'm not sure whether the Morroquendi pikes have got these weapons for Dale as well. I think the glaives are more of a Dor-winion thing. The sort of waved blades that Dor-winion have almost look like they've got thorns as well on them, which is neat. Witch-Elm Enslavers. If only the Tyrells were as cool as Dor-winion. Witch-Elm Enslavers still doing some work here. They're not going down without a fight, as you would expect from pound for pound the most deadly Rhudaur infantry unit when it comes to just pure melee. Brutal damage they're able to do to armoured units. Morroquendi Stalkers still firing the odd poison arrow in, as are the Morroquendi bows. And this is going to be the end. So the blue team did manage to turn around. They were 20% behind before the final engagement up here on the hill began, and they have managed to win by just over 10%. I mean, considering that this also includes units that have routed, this has, it is technically within 10%. Very well done by Dor-winion. This was a pretty good showcase, honestly, actually, of what Dor-winion are all about. Arsal, playing... I actually forgot to mention Arsal's name there. I'm dreadfully sorry, actually. But yeah, you can see Dor-winion getting a lot of kills there. Angmar not actually getting too many, considering that... Then again, they were against Harad, the one with the lowest man count on the field with the Muma kill, and with the War Beasts. You can see here Rhudaur going for a very large army as well, which they can certainly do. But that is what Dor-winion can... That's what Dor-winion are all about. They can absorb a lot of pressure, they can do a lot of damage with their very lethal cavalry. As well as, you can look at it as being like the human units are sort of your solid core, and then your elven units are your flare units, the units that you're going to win the battle with. Whereas the human units are the ones that ensure that you don't lose the battle, if that makes any sort of sense. But we'll have a look at what got the kills for the Angmar army, and Angmar had a bit of a rough time of it. They took a lot of damage near the start. They started to pull it back. If it had been just between Harad and Angmar, it would have been a very closely fought battle. But as it was, Rhudaur came over and bailed their ally out, so certainly an interesting engagement. But the Witch-Elm Inquisitors getting the most kills. Not too surprising, considering the rather hefty amount of cavalry that Harad got. Even though quite a lot of it was monstrous, there was still Serpent Guard, Black Serpents, as well as those camels as well to deal with. And let's not forget the Witch-Elm Inquisitors can also charge down infantry. They may not use lances, but they are still very difficult to kill. And it's a pretty scary sight to see the Witch King himself charging towards you with his chosen warriors. But yes, big thank you to Artorius for sending this one to me. As I said, this is probably going to be the last I show of 0.97 before it comes out, which, very early July is going to be when 0.97 is slated for release. I'm very much looking forward to that. Obviously, there will be a lot of content coming out from myself, J-Monster, and other content creators as well, I'm sure, for Reforged, because this is the new life we needed, I think, because I've been doing 0.96 for quite a while now, and it's done me solid, I must say, but the time has come for a lot of new content, and 0.97 is shaping up to be very, very good. It's been a long time in the making, so it is a whole big chunk of new content, which is exactly what the game needs, I think, and I have to say I think the developers have done a terrific job on it from what I've seen and played so far. So thank you for sending this one in to me, Artorius. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which will be a return to 0.96.1, and I think it will be either a Siege of Goblin Town or a Siege of Rivendell. We shall see.